During the medieval era, the Iberian Peninsula spent almost 8 centuries divided between the rule of the Muslim caliphates, known as Al-Andalus, and the Christian kingdoms of the northern peninsula, such as Leon, Castile, and Aragon, resisting Muslim occupation and gradually reconquering their territories. This turbulent period, marked by wars and conspiracies, became known as the Reconquista in Spanish history. During the military conflicts, a hero emerged whose name is echoed in history: Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar, better known as El Cid, or El Campeador, a bold and fearless warrior whose deeds became legendary and were enshrined in medieval tales. El Cid is thought to have been born sometime between 1043 and 1045 in Vivar, a small town about 10 kilometers north of Burgos, the capital of Castile. Historical records show that El Cid's father was Diego Llanes, part of the minor nobility of Castile. From an early age, El Cid showed remarkable fighting skills. He mastered the art of chivalry with flair and showed enormous leadership ability. A well-known story about El Cid describes how he acquired his famous warhorse, the white stallion Babica. El Cid's godfather was a Catholic monk called Pedro el Grande. Pedro's coming-of-age present to El Cid was a horse from an Andalusian herd. El Cid chose one that the godfather considered inferior, prompting the monk to exclaim, "Babica," meaning stupid in the old Castilian language. El Cid then chose the name Babica for his horse. El Cid was taught at the Castilian royal court, serving the prince and future king Sancho II, son of Ferdinand I of Leon. After Ferdinand I's death in 1065, Sancho II continued his father's goals of expanding his territory by conquering the Christian and Moorish cities of Zamora and Badajoz. El Cid pledged his sword in the name of King Sancho II, whose trust and friendship he had earned. El Cid fought alongside Sancho II against the Moorish fortress of Zaragoza in 1067. A legend says that during this conflict, El Cid killed an Aragonese knight in a duel. This is how Rodrigo Díaz de Vivar received the honorific title of El Cid Campeador, which can be translated as the Lord Champion. According to Spanish tradition and literature, El Cid had 2 legendary swords. One was the famous Tizona, which El Cid is said to have been bestowed as a gift from the Muslim king Yusuf ibn Tashfin. The other was Colada, supposedly made of Damascus steel. Both were used to fight the Al-Andalus forces, and according to popular legend, these swords would frighten unworthy opponents if wielded by a brave warrior. As a military commander, El Cid often ordered books by classical Roman and Greek authors on military themes to be read aloud to his troops to entertain and inspire them during battles. El Cid also liked to use unexpected strategies, opting for what modern generals call psychological warfare, spreading terror in his enemies and attacking them suddenly. When Sancho II was murdered by a traitor on October 7, 1072, in his own military camp, El Cid found himself embroiled in a maelstrom of treachery and conspiracy. The new king, Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile, younger brother of the late Sancho II, disliked El Cid, as the noble knight had much influence in the army and was respected even by Muslim generals and nobles. For his part, El Cid also liked to taunt powerful nobles and started disrespecting the orders issued by Alfonso VI. Despite their disagreements, El Cid married Jimena Diaz, the niece of King Alfonso VI. The couple had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. It was a marriage to appease tensions between El Cid and Alfonso VI. But the peace did not last long. Some Castilian nobles envied El Cid and started to stir up accusations of treason and corruption against him. The situation became even more tense after El Cid defeated Al-Qadir of the Kingdom of Toledo, as well as his Castilian ally Garcia Ordóñez at the Battle of Cabra in 1079. El Cid is said to have led an offensive military maneuver without royal permission, which deeply angered King Alfonso VI. As a result, El Cid lost all his nobility and lands and was exiled from the Kingdom of Castile and Leon. But exile was not El Cid's demise. Like many other knights before him who had also lost the king's favors, he sought a new lord whom he could serve, along with his small army. Living as a mercenary, El Cid went on to offer services to Yusuf al-Mutamin, Moorish king of the city of Zaragoza in northeastern Spain, and to his successor al-Musta'in II. Fearing an impending raid from the Kingdom of Aragon and the County of Barcelona, the King of Zaragoza sent El Cid to protect the kingdom's northeastern border. After fruitless negotiations with the assailants, El Cid decided to lead an attack against the enemy army. Even outnumbered, he achieved an impressive victory. The Battle of Morella in 1084 had a similar outcome. After plundering the land southeast of the Kingdom of Lleida and attacking the towering fortress of Morella, El Cid managed to fortify the castle of Alcalá del Rey. While El Cid was fighting for a Muslim king, King Alfonso VI was struggling against the Almoravid invasion of Spain. Terrified by consecutive defeats, Alfonso VI tried to re-establish contact with El Cid by calling him back from exile. El Cid agreed to serve the Kingdom of Leon in Castile again in 1087. El Cid went on to command a mixed Christian and Moorish army, attempting to create his own fiefdom in the Mediterranean coastal city of Valencia. After many years of siege, Valencia was conquered, and El Cid came to rule it, supposedly in the name of Alfonso VI. He had outright independence. The city was both Christian and Muslim. The two factions served in the army and government. But there was a new disagreement between El Cid and Alfonso VI when the Almoravid Emperor Yusuf ibn Tashufin of Morocco besieged the fortress of Aledo in the summer of 1088. Alfonso VI decided to promptly defend the fortress and ordered El Cid to join him in Villena so that the two armies could combine forces. For reasons unknown to this day, El Cid did not march to the king and ended up once again exiled from the Kingdom of Castile and Leon, with lands and goods confiscated. El Cid was pardoned once more and returned to Valencia in 1089, where he was again allowed to collect taxes in the capital and the surrounding villages. El Cid died at home in Valencia in 1099. His body lies in the center of Burgos's impressive cathedral. That was the end of the great warlord El Cid, El Campeador, respected by Christians and Muslims alike, feared by enemies and allies equally, a feat few leaders in history have achieved. A legend was born in the quiet country of Lancashire in late 13th century Scotland as a boy came into the world. William Wallace was raised in the midst of the lush hills and grand castles of the area as the son of Malcolm Wallace and Margaret Crawford. He displayed an unyielding determination from a young age, inspired by the tales of valor and fearlessness recounted by the historic Scottish clans. As William Wallace grew older, the oppression of Scotland by the English became severe. The English crown's involvement in the Scottish court began after the passing of King Alexander III of Scotland. He had been a successful ruler who brought a period of peace to Scotland during his reign. He kept a positive relationship with the English, using them as trading partners. Additionally, he signed the Treaty of Perth in 1266, which effectively resolved territorial disputes between Norway and Scotland. The death of Alexander III in 1286 resulted in a succession crisis in Scotland. At the age of 44, he passed away due to a fall from his horse while traveling overnight. The demise of the king had a devastating impact on the subjects, since his sole successor was his granddaughter, famously referred to as Margaret, Maid of Norway. Regrettably, Margaret passed away at the tender age of 7 while on a boat trip en route to Scotland, where she was meant to ascend to the throne. Following the death of Alexander III, Scotland experienced a tumultuous period, with conflicts among various clans and nobles vying for the vacant throne. The Scottish nobles sought King Edward I of England's intervention to prevent a devastating civil war. They hoped that the English monarch would assist in establishing a legitimate heir to the throne. For Edward I, this was the perfect opportunity to deploy English troops into Scotland and initiate a military invasion. Although Wallace came from a wealthy and influential family, he was not blind to the injustices perpetuated by the English invaders. He personally witnessed the suffering of his people. William Wallace's character was shaped by these experiences, and they ignited a strong resistance against the English oppressors. The details of William Wallace's life prior to his rebellion are not well documented. However, some chroniclers from that time have reported that Wallace may have aspired to live a peaceful life, and even married a lovely young woman named Marion Braidfute. In 1297, an English soldier who held the office of Sheriff of Lancashire, where Wallace and his wife lived, brutally murdered his darling. Wallace, consumed by grief and a strong urge for justice, made the decision to take action and fight. He relentlessly pursued his wife's murderer and delivered a fatal blow with a fierce sword strike. After gaining fame for killing the English sheriff, William Wallace rallied the Scottish clansmen by promising them revenge and freedom. With his eloquence and natural leadership skills, he was able to win over the Scottish warriors and unite them towards a common goal, driving out the English invaders. William Wallace led the Scots in numerous battles against King Edward I's troops. Due to being outnumbered, the Scots depended on guerrilla tactics to weaken the enemy forces. They would launch surprise attacks on the English in forests or villages. William Wallace's cause gained new supporters with each victory, resulting in the formation of a well-organized and respectable army that was unprecedented in Scottish history. The Battle of Stirling Bridge, fought on September 11, 1297, is a significant event in Scottish history. Wallace, followed by his faithful friend Andrew Moray, bravely led an army against a larger English force. The latter army, primarily composed of heavy infantry and cavalry, endeavored to cross the narrow bridge over the River Forth to confront the Scots. Wallace and his army chose a defensive strategy by positioning themselves on a nearby hill, which effectively blocked the passage across the bridge. The Scots launched a surprise attack when half of the English army had already crossed the bridge. Descending the hill, they caught the English in an adverse position. The heavy infantry of the English army found themselves trapped on the bridge, which hindered their ability to move effectively. Meanwhile, the Scottish archers and lancers opened attacks from the rear. During the Middle Ages, the English placed great reliance on their heavy cavalry, which was widely regarded as one of the most formidable and effective military units. The Scottish army successfully defended against it by implementing the Schiltron strategy, which involved Scottish rustic pikes. The English army sustained significant losses and ultimately disintegrated. The triumph of the Scots at Stirling Bridge dealt a major blow to the English and bolstered the reputation of William Wallace as the leader of the Scottish resistance. William Wallace and Andrew Moray were appointed as the guardians of Scotland. Their fame quickly spread throughout their land. However, shortly after the victory in 1297, Andrew Moray passed away, leaving Wallace to bask in all the glory of their triumph. Unfortunately, treachery and intrigue had already infiltrated the Scottish ranks, eroding the unity that had been achieved through great effort. In 1298, King Edward I ordered a new invasion against the Scots, which provided the Scottish traders with the opportunity they had been waiting for to act against Wallace. This event ultimately led to the Battle of Falkirk, which had fateful consequences. During the battle, Edward I took personal command of the English army and implemented a meticulously planned strategy to confront the Scots. At the start of the battle, the English archers launched an attack on the Scottish lines, resulting in considerable damage. Subsequently, the English heavy infantry and cavalry proceeded with their advance, while the Scottish infantry tried to maintain a defensive formation. The Scottish troops were hindered by the marshy terrain and heavy rain on that day, which impacted their mobility and effectiveness. Furthermore, the English army employed a combination of cavalry and archery tactics, which proved to be effective in overwhelming the Scottish defenses. Although Wallace and his men made heroic efforts, the Scottish forces were unable to withstand the English attack. They sustained significant losses and ultimately retreated from the battleground. The Scottish cause suffered a major setback with their defeat at the Battle of Falkirk. Despite managing to survive the fighting and escape from the English, William Wallace's military reputation suffered greatly. Following the disaster at Falkirk, Wallace resigned from his position as Guardian of Scotland. He then passed the role to Robert the Bruce, who was well known as the Earl of Carrick. This transition occurred 2 months after the aforementioned event. William Wallace traveled to France to request the assistance of the French king in their shared battle against a mutual adversary. Upon his return to Scotland, Wallace continued his fight against the English, primarily utilizing guerrilla tactics. In 1305, William Wallace was betrayed by a Scottish knight who was actually loyal to King Edward I of England. After being captured by English forces, William Wallace was charged with treason and taken to London to stand trial. Wallace was put through a mock trial in court, where he was not given any opportunity to defend himself or receive mercy. As a result, he was sentenced to death. William Wallace maintained his pride and refused to pledge loyalty to the English king, even when faced with torture and the possibility of execution. On August 23, 1305, he faced death with dignity, fully aware that his sacrifice would serve as an inspiration for generations to come. Despite the fact that William Wallace was executed, his unwavering spirit was not extinguished by his death. His heroic persona has been immortalized in ballads, poems, and legends that have been handed down from one generation to the next. Edward, the Black Prince of Wales, was a leading warrior in medieval England and King Edward III's eldest son. His military prowess and leadership were crucial during the 100 Years' War. His moniker, Black Prince, is traditionally ascribed to the distinctive black armor he wore in battle. Edward, as the first heir to the English throne to receive the title of Prince of Wales, set a precedent for future heirs to the British crown. Edward's childhood and youth were molded by the changing circumstances of his position as heir to the English throne and the political and military turmoil of his time. Edward was born on June 15, 1330, at Woodstock Palace, Oxfordshire. He was the eldest son of King Edward III of England and Queen Philippa of Hainault. When he was just 13 years old, Edward was crowned Prince of Wales in 1343. This was a landmark moment, cementing his position as heir apparent to the English throne. Being the youngest heir to English royalty, Edward was given an education suited to his position. He was taught the arts, literature, and sciences, as well as military and leadership skills. While Edward was growing up, the famous 100 Years' War was underway, a protracted clash between England and France from 1337 to 1453. Edward was introduced to the realities of war even in his youth. At 16, he was participating actively in military campaigns, among them the famous 1346 Battle of Crecy, where he showed remarkable bravery and tactical expertise. King Edward III positioned his army in 3 divisions on a hillside. The Black Prince was assigned command of the Central Division, a substantial responsibility for a young man of his age. The Black Prince's division encountered heavy pressure from the French cavalry during the battle. Yet, due to the soldiers' discipline and the effectiveness of the English archers, they managed to ward off the attacks. As the battle reached its most crucial moment, when the odds were stacked against the Black Prince, Edward III, his father, was urged to send reinforcements to save the prince. The king refused, however, hoping that his son would gain experience in battle and prove his worth. Although outnumbered, Prince Edward survived, and in the end, the English won the battle. The Black Prince's leadership role as a commander and warrior established his reputation as a worthy military leader. Following the victory at the 1346 Battle of Crécy, King Edward III of England directed his efforts towards Calais, an important French port city and fortress on the English Channel. Capturing Calais would be a key strategic move, as it would provide England with a foothold on the continent and an entry point for future campaigns in France. The Siege of Calais ran from September 1346 to August 1347, and Edward the Black Prince had a fundamental hand to play during the siege. To avoid a direct storming, which would have caused heavy casualties for the English, Edward III chose a prolonged siege, expecting the city to surrender due to hunger and shortages. The Black Prince and other commanders took part in the daily operations of the siege, guaranteeing that no aid reached the besieged city. Once Calais surrendered, the city continued under English control for more than 2 centuries, until 1558. The Battle of Winchelsea was a naval engagement on August 29, 1350, between an English fleet commanded by King Edward III and a Castilian fleet. This was one of many maritime scuffles between England and Spain during the 100 Years' War. Edward the Black Prince joined his father on the naval expedition. The English fleet, consisting of around 50 ships, set sail from Sandwich to cut off the Castilians. The English faced a 40-ship Castilian fleet in the battle. The Castilians were renowned for their naval warfare abilities, as their ships were taller and better fortified. Nonetheless, the English resorted to audacious tactics, boarding the Castilian ships and engaging in hand-to-hand combat. The battle ultimately ended in a decisive triumph for the English. They took several Castilian ships and sank many others. The Battle of Winchelsea proved the English Navy's resolve and ability to protect its trade routes and coastlines. It also provided an opportunity for the Black Prince to prove his bravery and military abilities in a naval context, rather than on the land battlefield. About a decade after the Battle of Crécy, the Battle of Poitiers took place on September 19, 1356. The Black Prince headed an army across southwest France, plundering and seizing territory. The drive climaxed with the battle near Poitiers, where the English were up against a significantly larger French army led by King John II of France. Coming at a crucial point in the battle, when the French were running amok, the Black Prince took the daring decision to mount a counterattack. This caught the French off guard and sparked the collapse of their army. Among the most notable consequences of the battle was the capture of King John II of France. A monarch caught in battle was a rare occurrence and gave the British a great political and ransom edge. Edward the Black Prince's marriage is especially remarkable in medieval history due to his union with Joan of Kent, otherwise known as the Fair Maiden of Kent. Joan came from a noble lineage, being the Black Prince's cousin and known for her outstanding beauty. The marriage was apparently a union of love and mutual respect, something rather unusual for the noble marriages of the time, which were often agreed for political or territorial reasons. Following remarkable military successes, especially at the battles of Crécy and Poitiers, he was appointed by his father as Prince of Aquitaine and Gascony in 1362. The Black Prince's presence and actions in Aquitaine were a crucial part of the 100 Years' War and his military and administrative career. Aquitaine was a sprawling region in southwest France and was a point of contention between the English and French for generations. The Black Prince's rule was not always smooth. He encountered resistance from some segments of the local nobility, who were loyal to the French crown or resented English authority. The Aquitaine noblemen, upset by the high taxation, took their complaints to Charles V, King of France. Taking this as an excuse and alleging that the Black Prince had not fulfilled his feudal obligations, Charles V announced that the English territories in France would be seized. This rekindled the armed conflict between France and England. Edward's constant military campaigns politics, and illness severely affected his health. He returned to England in 1371, resigning his position in Aquitaine. Edward the Black Prince died on June 8, 1376, aged 45. Edward's passing marked the end of an era for medieval England. He was a highly charismatic figure and a gifted military leader, whose deeds and actions had a lasting impact on the history of England and Europe.